Clouds the color of bruised steel drifted across the sky above Nightglass, swirling around the husk of the broken moon. On the plain below, thousands of campfires drew an orange scrawl that traced the besieging army's front line, yet none of that glow could push farther than a few dozen paces. Nightglass's orbital shield swallowed light as greedily as it deflected artillery, leaving every shell burst and rocket flare stifled in a muffled halo. To the soldiers huddling in the trenches, the fortress city appeared less like a bastion of ceramic and alloy than a jagged hole punched straight through the world and straight into a night so deep it looked alive. Captain Leah Rassoen crouched inside the operations bunker, visor dimmed, as the last preparatory briefing scrolled across the holoprojector. She did not watch the miniature maps or the glowing countdown. She watched the light itself. Each time a technician widened the holo's brightness, the afterimage swam behind her lenses for a heartbeat and then dissolved, sucked away, as though Nightglass's darkness had reached in to swallow even that pale imitation. Sitting there, she felt, almost physically, the weight of the city's gloom, leaning across the distance, pressing on ribs and lungs with a gravity all its own. "Target windows open in 5. Said Commander Dial, voice clipped, purposeful. "Once ingress commences, radio silence. Exfil in 90, or we mark you fallen. Questions?" No one spoke. There were 6 of them on Team Eclipse, names cut down to the last 3 letters because brevity meant fewer dying syllables. Lyra was Ren. Beside her were NAT, Kier, Gauss, VE, and SIQ. Tucked into the black folds of their suits, helmets polished to a light-devouring matte that looked more like a tear in reality than material. Fabric filaments sewn with prismatic graphite would, once activated, channel the smallest trickle of radiance. Radiance that tonight came from somewhere stranger than a sun. The engineers called it eclipsed starlight. Photons sluiced through the ruin of the shattered lunar body, bent and slowed by gravitational glass until they slid through space like oil. Where ordinary light scattered, this light aligned, its waveform coiled into obedient thread. It could be caught, woven, and stored inside the suit's microcapacitors. Most importantly, it refused to disclose its presence. No infrared spike, no ultraviolet shimmer, no telltale gleam. It was illumination that lit nothing external, fueling only the cloak itself. In theory, a soldier inside such armor became a silhouette even darkness could not detect, drifting colder than the night and quieter than absence. The theory had been tested twice, once in a laboratory corridor against automated sentries, once during a raid on an ammunition depot in the foothills. The first test lasted 4 minutes. The second lasted 11 and cost 2 operatives when an unstable battery flash-baked their organs. There had been no time for a third trial, not when Nightglass still swallowed every shell the Coalition lobbed against its walls. If the shield generator beneath the central tower held, the siege would stretch into years. If the generator fell, the city would crumble within hours. The choice, Strategic Command proclaimed, was therefore simple. Ren's palms were dry. The calm surprised her. Before her first combat skydive, she had felt her pulse hot in the back of her throat, each beat so sharp it threatened to cut. Today there was only the subdued anticipation of a musician poised before the downstroke of a conductor's baton. Perhaps certainty bred calm. Tonight, someone would die. Either the mission would fail and the army outside would be driven back to drown in retreat, or the mission would succeed and 6 shadows would gutter out inside a fortress whose architects believed it inviolate. Either way, the siege would end. They lifted the bunker's back hatch, revealing a trench roofed by tarps. Even so, the spill of amber light from the command hollows rushed outward and stopped short, clipped by an invisible line where it met Nightglass's shadow. The effect reminded Ren of watching a candle set beside a pane of black glass, flame present, reflection absent. She watched Nat trigger her suit. A hush folded around them, Deeper than silence, turbofan drones overhead became distant, then mute, then non-existent. A trickle of eclipsed starlight poured from the storage unit on Wren's belt, through silver-etched veins along her arms. The world pinched at the edges. They walked. Each step carried them into a realm whose physics argued with memory. Sound staggered somewhere behind their ears, diluted to vague pressure. Color fled. Even smell recoiled. Wren's breath rasped faintly within the rebreather, but did not emerge past her lips. She saw the outline of her hand because the suit's inner heads-up display traced it with ion blue wireframe. Yet when she lifted that hand into open air, it vanished. She looked left where Kier had been and beheld only the suggestion of motion. The others would be reading the telemetry feed the same way, little glyphs mapping one brain to another across a mesh network, verging on telepathy. A drainage culvert yawned ahead, its mouth submerged beneath a stagnant moat that circled the city. Coalition sappers had drained the outer canal yesterday, leaving mud soft as pudding. From afar it resembled an obsidian ring, liquid darkness against the dry plain. In truth, it was only filth, dyed by the fortress's strange glow. Wren waded in without ripples. Once submerged, she felt warmth, the generator's waste heat bleeding through kilometers of subterranean architecture into the water. She imagined bacteria multiplying by the billions, feasting on industrial seep. Once, this place had exported bioluminescent algae to art clubs across the quadrant. Now it birthed poison. The culvert narrowed to a pipe. Here they belly-crawled, suits brushing steel worn thin by centuries of flow. The engineers had warned them, no cutting torches, no welding arcs, no grit that might generate a spark bright enough to betray them. Even friction in the wrong register could create a signature if enemy scanners were tuned fine enough. The suit's artificial epidermis helped, distributing pressure, converting it to cooler wavelengths. But no suit could do everything. VEI tapped a code against Wren's ankle. Ahead, sensors. Wren's visor confirmed, a grid of tripwires, barely visible in infrared, fibers braided from something beyond human forge. She took the lead. 2 fingers extended, she drew a sigil in midair, instructing her cloak to bleed starlight into her right hand alone. The glove brightened minutely, not with visible shine, but with the transparency of an X-ray lamp. Where fingers approached the tripwire, the wire's own energy refracted around them, fooled into completing its loop. She lifted, held, let her teammates glide beneath the trembling strand. For 3 heartbeats, her hand imitated the precise resistance of the displaced fiber. Then she lowered it back. The grid never noticed. Minutes, or perhaps hours later, the math of darkness warped time, they reached a vertical shaft. It plunged deep into the fortress's core, lined by maintenance rungs. Warm air rose, carrying the petrochemical tang of coolant. From here, enemy patrol routes overlapped enough that any mistake would be fatal in seconds. Wren issued a pulse to confirm readiness. All responded. They ascended. Up 10 meters, they paused at a vent. Internal cameras stared outward with faceted insect eyes. A single flick of white across any lens would loose sonic turrets capable of liquefying bone. Yet eclipsed starlight tasted sweeter to optics than blindness. They passed unregistered. At level 32, the shaft opened into an atrium under the central tower. Here, at last. The fortress was not silent. Machinery thundered in a basso drone, each frequency engineered to harmonize with the next, weaving vibrations into a structural anthem. Resonance dampers fed power back into magnetic coils. The effect reminded Wren of standing inside a cathedral organ while the pipes announced apocalypse. Her fingertips tingled. According to schematics, the shield generator's heart lay 200 meters beyond, behind layered plating of carbon nanotube lattice and exotic field projectors. Their objective was not to destroy that heart to fortified, but to kill its coolant lines. Overheat would do the rest. They knelt beside a maintenance console. Goss slotted a wafer into an exposed port. The wafer's embedded virus whispered through the fortress's intranet, seeding false positives in service drones, forging dummy maintenance tickets, delaying real alerts. It would not last long. Nightglass's AI Dean oversaw 15 billion redundant subroutines, but a 10-minute fog of confusion might suffice. Wren watched Ghost Eel flare and fade on her overlay as cameras looped old footage. Doors reported themselves sealed when open. Alarms rehearsed sirens in mute rehearsal. She signaled advance. First obstacle, a corridor patrolled by what infantry rumor called glass wolves. Quadruped frames plated in transparent ceramic, limbs jointed backward and sculpted around railgun hardware. They were rumored to sniff radiance itself. The squad waited for a lull, then coasted forward, microservos modulating suit temperature to match ambient walls within 1/10th degree. A wolf paused, head pivoting. Through it, Rin saw the corridor behind, as though looking through a chalice of living crystal. She froze. The wolf's muzzle passed a hair from her throat. Its internal organs glowed faint green, power cells born from bio-grown lattice. Then it stalked on, mindless. He reached the coolant artery, an umbilicus the width of an orbital shuttle, humming with cryogel. Explosive charges would be too hot. Instead, Kier unpacked a swarm of microborers no bigger than seeds. Each carried a gram of metallophages engineered to devour the pipe from within, converting alloy to brittle foam. The borers adhered, drilled silently, vanished. Telemetry spiked. Pressure drop predicted in 6 minutes. That window would also mark the first recovery ping from the crippled sensors. Once the AI noticed the coolant bleed, countermeasures would flood every shaft with superheated steam. They had to be gone. Egress was routed through a cargo elevator shaft. They descended on tungsten cable. At 60 meters down, the world lurched. A tremor rolled through steel bones. Somewhere above, turbines screamed. The generator's shields dimmed momentarily, and when they flared back, they did so erratically, pulses strobe flickering. Wren grinned without meaning to, but joy was brief. An override slammed the elevator motor to life, teeth grinding against gear. The cable jerked. VEI lost grip, tumbled, grabbed too late. She fell into the dark, suit eclipsing her even from the other sensors, until she hit the bottom with a sound that came thin and final through comm filters. There was no time for retrieval. The PsyQ's biometrics peaked red as he swallowed the choice. He cut the remainder of the cable, converting it to a rappel, and the team abandoned the shaft 4 levels below. They crashed into a storage bay stuffed with munitions crates. Here, bright fluorescent strips glared emergency lighting. The fortress had, at last, decided blindness less dangerous than infiltration. The suit's camouflage faltered under direct lumens. Rin toggled to pulse mode. Micro-shutters across the armor flickered syncopated patterns that teased the eye into ignoring them, a temporal sleight of hand. Good enough, never perfect. Drone squads poured down walkways overhead. Sirens arrived, not from speakers but vibrating through the floor, subsonic. The fortress itself had begun to sing. Nat took point toward the secondary culvert. Halfway there, a serum glass wolf vaulted a crate and landed square upon Nat's back. Its forelimbs pierced the cloak, locking like bear traps. Nat's scream cut off as the wolf's railgun spat a tungsten flechette point blank. The impact transferred kinetic energy through armor plating and out again as pulverized organs. She slumped. Wren pivoted, drew a monomachete of charged edge, and severed the wolf's neck. Ceramic shards chimed like icy bells. Too loud. Now it was 4. Goss launched a counter-virus, but the AI merely shrugged. All vents belched steam. Visibility dropped to arm's length. In the swirl, light refracted into feverish halos. Their suits dimmed them to motes within chaos, yet every second heat climbed. Wren set course for a maintenance rail that circled the bay, sealing. Up, over, down, the shortest path to the culvert. SIQ lagged, favoring the leg broken in the elevator jump. He urged them onward. Ren hesitated, then grabbed him under the arm, boosting power to joint servos. Together, they climbed. Something slammed Goss from the side. Another wolf or, perhaps, turret fire. The mist hid shapes. His vitals vanished. Ren, SIQ, and Kier made the rail. Below, coolant pipes burst in successive pops, spraying nitrogen snow. Metal shrieked. The fortress's shield winked. The first dimming visible from outside, she knew, would unleash every artillery piece the Coalition had cached. That knowledge drove her faster. At the rail's end lay an exhaust chute, venting to the moat. Kier kicked the grate free. Superheated air roared through the gap, searing suit fabric. The cloak's thermal regulator screamed warning runes, but opening the chute would also blow them outward. They lashed repelling lines again. SIQ first. He vanished down the plume, sensors fuzzy. Ren was halfway through the hatch when Kier yelled. Two wolves were on the rail. One plunged its maw into Kier's abdomen, lifting him off his feet. He triggered his demolitions pack. The blast died in the oppressive shroud of the shielded walls. But the rail folded, wolves and man and fire dropping away. Shockwaves hammered Ren against the hatch rim. She tumbled down the chute uncontrolled. Suit mass dampers struggling. Then there was water, shock cold despite the fortress heat. She sank into silt that clutched like hands. Suit seal integrity held. Orientation gyros spun. Upward, faint turbulence. She kicked, broke surface within the drained canal's muck. Above, the fortress tower glimmered with strobing arcs. Slabs of plating glowed orange, structural veins bleeding white plasma. Siege artillery lances, carved into exposed bone. The shield tried to knit, but faltered. Patchwork flickers leaving iris-shaped gashes through which kinetic slugs screamed. Across the moat, Coalition troops cheered, yet sound reached her soft, as though each syllable traveled a century to arrive. Partial auditory muffle remained. She scanned. SIQ lay sprawled 10 meters away, breathing shallow. Sutorn, she slogged to him, dragging both bodies behind a chunk of broken parapet. Medical triage protocols engaged, feeding coagulants and synthetic blood. His words came ragged. Generator? Got it? Done, she said. Rest. He coughed wet. Eclipse starlight. A laugh. All this and no one will know what guided them? We'll know, Ren replied. Above, the tower's topmost beam folded, and a corona blossomed, molten glass incandescent against the deep. She watched it, letting heat settle in bones. Counter-battery traceline stitched sky. Soon, infantry would storm breaches corridors where her team's ghosts still lingered. Progress demanded payment. The calculus of war always balanced. Evac medics found them an hour later, once drones declared the moat secure. Ren refused stretcher until SIQ boarded first. Under surgical tent light, her suit looked like smoke trapped in plastic, intangible, smudged, unreal. Technicians peeled it off. Eclipse starlight bled from torn circuits, guttering like fireflies before winking out. Someone asked for her name. She gave serial, rank, squad designation. They logged them into the records. KIR, Goss, VEI, Nat, deceased. SIQ critical. R ran stable. The clerk hesitated at the blank beside mission asset. Ren answered, Star Shadow, MQ5E. The clerk shrugged, type. He would never grasp what it meant to wear light that had forgotten how to shine. 3 days later, Siege Command paraded divisions through Nightglass's central plaza. The city smoldered, half ruin, shield generator now a slag crater steaming under chemical sprays. Banners unfurled, reporters broadcast triumph. When the general spoke, she thanked artillery crews, armored battalions, logistical wizards. She cited courage, ingenuity, perseverance. Of the 6 who had walked within the fortress before any bombardment, there was no mention. Classified, explained an aide. Necessary, said another. Only under secrecy could such techniques remain deterrent. Ren stood in the crowd wearing a drab uniform, hood drawn against ash drift. SIQ watched beside her, Kane propping his healing leg. They listened, unobtrusive. He whispered, "Once the next war comes, they'll try to copy us." "They'll try," she agreed, "but they'll never have that light again. The eclipse is past." Indeed, the broken moon now traced a different orbit, the alignment that created the impossible photons already dissolving. Nightglass's fall had consumed the last reservoir. Perhaps cosmic circumstance would birth another in some other century, but humankind would have changed by then, anger wearing a fresh face. Ren found comfort there. Dusk settled, fires dimmed. In the dying gleam, she raised her gaze to the sky where a faint scar marked the lunar fracture. She owed something to those who slept beneath the rebel, to those whose names shrank to 3 letters before vanishing. She could not resurrect them, nor carve statues, nor publish hidden deeds. But she could remember what the dark had felt like when it wrapped around her like second skin, how silence hummed, how breath dared not mist, how eclipsed starlight guided footfalls across wires so thin they might have been spider silk strung through eternity. She would remember, and that would be enough.